estate, popping a bottle of expensive champagne. They'd just signed the final papers to sell her beloved home behind her back for $1.4 million, entirely fueled by greed while they thought she was too old to notice. My mother looked at the buyers and said, "It's all yours. The old woman won't be a problem anymore." They smiled, utterly triumphant, until the buyer's real estate attorney pulled a certified legal deed from his briefcase. His face drained of all color as he read the stamp on the front. He looked up at my parents, his voice trembling, and whispered, "They don't own this house, and neither do you." My parents froze mid-laugh, realizing the trap had just snapped shut. Follow my story until the end to see how a sweet 79 city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Chloe Harrington, and I am 26 years old. To look at my family from the outside, you would think we had it all: wealth, status, and an enviable lifestyle. But behind closed doors, my parents possessed an insatiable greed that ultimately led to their downfall. They always saw people as investments, and nowhere was this more apparent than in how they treated my sweet grandmother, Evelyn. The true depth of their cold calculation became clear on her last birthday, a heartbreaking moment that I will never forget. Grandma Evelyn was turning 79, a milestone that should have been celebrated with laughter, family, and warmth. Instead, she sat completely alone at her dining table with a small, lit birthday cake. While she sat in that empty house, my parents were miles away, hitting the pristine slopes and skiing in luxury in Aspen, completely indifferent to her existence. I arrived at her house late that evening after a grueling shift at work, furious at my parents' cruelty. Yet, when I walked in, Grandma Evelyn wasn't crying. She looked up at me with her gentle, wise eyes, blew out her single candle, and smiled through the quiet pain. As I held her hand, she dropped a series of quiet, cryptic hints. "They think my age makes me blind, Chloe," she whispered, looking around the historic rooms. "But a house built on love cannot be stolen by those who only worship paper." At the time, I thought she was just comforting me. I had no idea she knew exactly what my parents were plotting. The moment my parents returned from their luxurious skiing trip in Aspen, the atmosphere in our family shifted from cold indifference to active malice. Drowning in an avalanche of heavy credit card debts and desperate to maintain their illusion of high society success, they decided to pull off the ultimate betrayal. They dug through their old financial files and pulled out a power of attorney document that Grandma Evelyn had signed over a decade ago during a brief medical scare. Believing that old piece of paper gave them absolute control over her life, they quietly went behind her back and listed her pristine, historical estate on the market for a staggering $1.4 million. To keep us completely in the dark, my mother and father orchestrated a highly calculated schedule. Every Tuesday and Thursday, my mother would call me with a sudden, synthetic burst of sweetness, urging me to take Grandma Evelyn out for her long medical appointments, grocery shopping trips, or scenic drives along the coast. She claimed she just wanted Evelyn to get some fresh air. In reality, the moment our car pulled out of the driveway, my parents and their sleazy real estate agent would swoop into the house like vultures. They held secret open houses, ushered wealthy investors through her private living room, and allowed complete strangers to inspect the bedrooms where Evelyn had spent her entire life. They treated her home like a prize carcass to be carved up, laughing at how incredibly easy it was to manipulate an old woman and her naive granddaughter. By the time we returned home each evening, every trace of the intrusion had been meticulously wiped away, leaving us completely oblivious to the trap they were building. The very next day, the illusion of our quiet life shattered completely, bringing our hidden family conflict to an unexpected turning point. I was at Grandma Evelyn's house, quietly helping her clean up the kitchen and dust the old wooden bookshelves in the living room, trying to make her feel comfortable and cared for. Suddenly, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed through the quiet hallway, startling us both. When I opened the heavy front door, I wasn't greeted by a neighbor or a delivery person. Instead, two stone-faced, complete strangers stood on the porch, dressed in sharp business suits and holding leather briefcases. They didn't say a word to me at first. They simply stepped forward and handed me a thick, official-looking manila folder. My hands began to tremble as I broke the legal seal and pulled out the crisp documents inside. I expected it to be an aggressive eviction notice or a formal demand from my parents' real estate agent. Instead, my eyes widened as I scanned the dense legal text. Right there on the bottom line was a bold, unmistakable signature signed by Grandma Evelyn herself. The documents were officially notarized and stamped, dated exactly 4 months prior, long before my parents had even conceived their plan to sell the estate behind her back. I looked over at Evelyn, expecting her to be panicked or confused by the sudden arrival of these legal couriers. Instead, she quietly set down her teacup, gave me a knowing, confident look, and told me to read the paperwork very carefully. The mysterious directives contained within that folder were about to change the rules of the game entirely. Less than an hour later, the front door burst open as my parents marched into the house unannounced. They weren't alone. They were flanked by their arrogant real estate agent, who was clutching a gold pen and a stack of closing contracts. My mother didn't even bother to take off her designer sunglasses. She threw a cheap brochure for an underfunded, clinical assisted living facility onto the dining table and looked at my grandmother with absolute disdain. "It's time to face reality, Evelyn," my mother announced, her voice dripping with synthetic authority. "We've just accepted a non-contingent, $1.4 million cash offer for this property. The buyers want to close immediately, which means you and Chloe have exactly 30 days to pack up your things and vacate the premises." I immediately stepped between them, my heart pounding with furious rage. "You can't just throw her out of her own home. This is illegal, and you know it," I shouted, trying to shield my grandmother from their cruelty. My father just laughed, a cold, mocking sound as he pulled the old power of attorney document from his breast pocket and waved it directly in my face. "We can do whatever we want, Chloe," he boasted, tapping the paper with his finger. "This gives us absolute legal authority to liquidate her assets, and there isn't a single thing you or this old woman can do to stop us." The paperwork is finalized. Throughout the entire aggressive confrontation, Grandma Evelyn remained completely calm, rocking slowly in her favorite chair. She looked up at her greedy children, a sharp, knowing smile breaking across her face, and quietly told them to go ahead and attempt to finalize the closing. The final closing meeting took place right on the front porch under the afternoon sun, exactly where my parents thought they would seal their victory. Their real estate agent eagerly slid the contract across the table, waiting for the buyer's real estate attorney to sign over the $1.4 million. My parents were already whispering about the luxury vacations and debt payoffs they were going to fund with the cash. But before the buyers could sign, the attorney opened the official manila folder that had been delivered to the house earlier that morning, comparing its contents to the title deed my parents had provided. Suddenly, the attorney stopped reading. The confident smile completely vanished from his face, and he went stone-cold silent. "Is there a problem?" my father asked, his voice tightening with a sudden spike of anxiety. The attorney looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief, and slid the new documents across the table. "A massive problem," he whispered. "This sale is legally void. This property doesn't belong to you, and you have absolutely no right to sell it." My mother copied, waving her hands in the air. "That's absurd. We have the power of attorney. We control her assets." The attorney shook his head, pointing directly to the certified legal stamps on the new paperwork. "You had power of attorney. For months ago, Evelyn legally revoked it. Not only that, but she quietly transferred the entire ownership of this historic estate into an ironclad, irrevocable trust managed exclusively by her granddaughter, Chloe." My parents froze, their jaws dropping as they stared at me in absolute horror. The attorney wasn't done breaking the news. Furthermore, she took out a massive, fully legal private lien against the property's value, which means even if this house could be sold, every single dollar of the $1.4 million payout goes directly into Chloe's private trust account. "You're walking away with zero." The trap had just snapped shut, and my parents were completely ruined. The immediate fallout for my parents was swift, brutal, and completely devastating. Because they had signed a binding contract to sell a multi-million-dollar historic estate that they didn't actually own, the wealthy buyers immediately slapped them with an aggressive, massive breach of contract lawsuit. On top of that, the buyer's real estate attorney wasted no time reporting their actions to the authorities, leaving my parents facing severe, looming criminal charges for real estate fraud and attempted elder financial abuse. Their entire financial house of cards collapsed virtually overnight. To pay off their aggressive legal defense fees and appease their existing mountain of credit card debts, they were forced to liquidate all their remaining assets. They had to watch helplessly as their beloved new luxury cars were towed away, and they had to downsize from their upscale neighborhood into a cramped, noisy, two-bedroom apartment near the highway. Meanwhile, Grandma Evelyn remained completely safe, secure, and undisturbed in the home she loved, entirely unfazed by their predictable desperation. She had relied on her sharp wits to protect her legacy, and justice had been served beautifully. 3 months later, a beautiful sense of peace has finally settled over our lives. Grandma Evelyn and I are sitting out on the front porch together, sipping fresh tea and enjoying the vibrant, blooming garden. Looking back, this entire wild experience taught me a powerful lesson. Unbridled greed will always trip over its own feet, while love and quiet wisdom endure. Now, I'm incredibly curious about all of you who have listened to my story today. What would you have done if you found yourself in my shoes? Have you ever witnessed family members turn? In the meantime, I'm leaving 2 other incredible, dramatic stories right here on the final screen. They are absolutely will definitely surprise you. Thank you so much for watching.